little bit ghost-like today, something really strange about the lighting. But anyway, I just wanted to have a few more comments on the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine and the response of the West. I'd also like to mention that I've just been having a little look at the charts of Greece, Israel, and Egypt, and I'm seeing something there. And I note that Greece recently signed some sort of favorable agreement with Russia, and they are kind of eager not for that to be disrupted by this. Israel are feeling this current escalation could be bad for reigniting a problem in Syria. And I'm wondering if a rather unanticipated spin-off could happen because of this, with the whole thing, tensions, hostilities, whatever you want to call it, breaking out in Syria and affecting that whole eastern Mediterranean region. So I'm quite interested in that. Also, I would like to note that I think it's the sons of Nancy Pelosi and John Kerry are also heavily involved in the Ukrainian oil and gas industry. I don't know if it's with Burisimo particularly, the same as Hunter Biden. Kind of interesting how the Democrats have so many conflicts of interest when it comes to Ukraine, and we know that Biden threatened to withdraw $1 billion in aid if Poroshenko didn't remove a prosecutor off the case of corruption investigations. So, an awful lot going on there. So I hear a lot of bellicose rufflings in the media, Julie Hartley-Brewer, friends of mine, and I'm just wondering, are their children going to be sent out to fight? Because it seems that a lot of people are very eager for other people's children and grandchildren to lay down their lives rather than their own. So, as I say, I think it's a little bit of NIMBYism there, not in my backyard. They'd like to think that the West can take a muscular approach and fight off Putin, but I don't think that's realpolitik, especially as a lot of other countries, Germany, are not so sure. I mean, America, Biden put pressure on Germany to close down Nord Stream 2. Germany is very reliant on Russia for oil and gas. I mean, the UK are less reliant on Russia, but at the same time, if all our allies in a world of international trade, if many of our allies are reliant on Russia for oil and gas, their costs are going to go up massively. There's a knock-on effect. Plus the fact that we can expect our gas prices to quadruple very soon simply because of all this, plus petrol prices. In a way, I think it's convenient because this is the ultimate fallout of the poorly thought out green revolution that we're having, particularly here in the UK. It might be convenient for them to blame it all on Russia and Ukraine and what's going on there, when really it is their mismanagement. Because what they're doing with the coal-fired power stations in the UK is, when they are old, instead of mothballing them, but kind of keeping them in reserve, just in case we need extra capacity, they totally blow them up and demolish them, so that extra capacity is not there. Plus, there was a huge gas storage facility in the North Sea that the UK had access to. They've given that up. So they've made us totally reliant on this iffy green energy and energy from other sources. I think that's a very negative thing, and that's given Putin a lot of power. Another thing is, Mike Adams did a brilliant show on this a while ago, saying that if you don't have a coal fire power system in your country, if you're not using coal to generate electricity and using fossil fuels in some capacity in your country, you don't get a byproduct of nitrates, which can be used for fertilizers. So the UK used to make all their own fertilizers, but now we import the vast majority of our fertilizer from, guess where? Russia and Belarus. So talking about sanctions on Russia, what if we suddenly can't get fertilizer from those places? Then between Russia, China, Ukraine and South Africa being a BRICS country, there is a monopoly on platinum and vanadium, without which you do not have an aircraft manufacturing industry, and also chromium, without which you cannot make steel. China make 1,000 times the steel that the UK make. So going at Russia will alienate China, who's always going to be Russia's ally, and therefore there's going to be a massive supply chain problem. So you see, our politicians are not educated or savvy enough to understand any of these implications. Russia and China control a vast amount, especially Russia, of natural resources without which the West industry cannot function at all. And these are vital considerations that have given a huge advantage to Russia. Someone was saying in the paper that, Russia They're isolated. No, they're not, because India are remaining neutral. India are very interested in being involved in the Belt and Road Initiative. Because while the business of the West is war, the business of China is business. And while I don't approve of the Chinese Communist Party, they do a very good job of business, and India, Brazil, South Africa are very interested in doing business with China and being on their Belt and Road, which they see as a way forward, not the American empire. So those countries are going to stick with China, with Russia, because Russia and China are key to the Belt and Road. So this is a whole shift in power from the West to Russia and China. Now, I don't say that I'm thrilled about that, but I think that the forces that control the West have pushed it in that direction, maybe more quickly than they wanted to. Now, I did hear that Gates and others were having a conference call sometime this week, and they said they were absolutely astonished at the cratering in trust that public have in media and government. It's really alarmed and upset them, and I think that's why they've taken their foot off the pedal in terms of the health agenda. Now, they thought that Twitter and Facebook fueled Brexit and Trump, and if they took those out and massively censored on there, they could stop the populist threat. But now they realize that people in the alternate sphere have communicated quite adequately without Facebook and Twitter on Telegram, Getter and all that. So I think their next step is going to be a massive crackdown on the alt media, and we know with the harms law in the UK it's moving in that direction. Because now they've realized too many people are so-called like awake to this and talking about the Great Reset, so they want to crack down on that before they move ahead, and I think they're using the whole Russia thing as a distraction, an excuse for the financial crash that's coming. They're going to shift all the blame on Russia, Ukraine when we have this inevitable financial crash, and in the UK when we have this inevitable surge in energy prices because of this ridiculous green policy which is bringing us ever closer to the Great Reset, and you will own nothing and you will be happy. They can't convince people not to travel. They may not be able to convince people to have electric cars and to use less gas and oil, but they can price you out of that market, can't they? Very easily. That's what they intend to do. Yeah, Pakistan have also recently signed an agreement with Russia. So these countries are going to carry on supporting Russia, as I say. Now, another big thing. Talk about the subprime mortgage crisis. There was another looming catastrophe in America because too much money had been lent to the shale industry, and they weren't making any money because gas prices were too low. Gas prices need to be at least over, I think, 60 a barrel for them to make any money. And because they weren't making any money, they were borrowing more and more and more and creating a huge crisis. However, thanks to the Russia-Ukraine thing and the prices of oil and all that going through the roof, shale gas is now relatively cheaper. So that might be very good for the shale industry in America. And what if Europe can't get their oil stroke gas from Russia, and they have to get it from the shale industry in America? That really helps bail them out and avoid a huge cratering there. So sanctions on Russia. What sanctions can they do? They can sanction in terms of the banking system. But the last thing the Rothschilds want is that. They want their horrible little fiat currency Ponzi schemes and private central banking Ponzi schemes in every country. So they won't want to shut Russia out of that. The best thing they could do is that, because then they could get their own currency, their own sovereign central bank, non-private central bank, their national central bank, and print their own money. And the last thing they want is anything like that happening. When people talk about that, like Kennedy, like Verwoerd in South Africa, like even the Tsar in Russia, like Lincoln, they get the very, very quickly when they talk about that. Then they could use sanctions and make sure that Taiwan don't sell them the very important, is it the silicon chips or whatever they make in Taiwan that are fairly specific. Russia is about 5 years away from being capable of making those locally in Russia. So they could do that, but Russia will just buy them through China, won't they? China buy them from Taiwan, they buy from China. And if they try and shut that down, then it's an effectively declaring war on China. Is the way open for China to invade Taiwan? I've looked at the chart. I think it's possible. But, I mean, I want to go back there and just get a bit more clarity on that. But unfortunately, yes, it is. And the West have neglected their armed services. They've treated the people badly. They've underinvested. And yet now they want to be very bellicose and act like it's still the glory days. when it very much isn't. Chickens are coming home to roost. I also note in the media, oh, Putin is invading Ukraine. Yes, well, didn't Obama invade Libya? And Cameron, I think he was the main instigator, and Sarkozy. They invade Syria, they invade Libya, they cause havoc in Yemen, they cause havoc in Somalia. But, you know, if Putin does something, then, oh, this is really, really different. You know, someone was saying to me, well, if I am going to defend Vladimir Putin, why don't I go and live in Minsk? Well, apart from that being a really childish argument, I'd like to know, well, why? What is Putin going to do? Is he going to censor me? Is he going to freeze my bank account and trample on me with a Clydesdale horse? Is he going to beat me with a baton? Is he going to aim directed energy weapons at me? Is he going to throw me in prison without bail, without charges and without trial for months, if not years on end? Am I, as a peaceful protester, going to be discriminated against? Am I going to be experimented on with experimental medication without informed consent? Am I going to be prevented from leaving my country? Am I going to be prevented from going on a train or a plane? Am I going to be prevented from going to restaurants? Am I going to be prevented from going to university? Am I going to be prevented from going to a ball game, a concert, or maybe even out my house at all? Gee, isn't that already happening in the West? God, I think Putin would need a lot more imagination in order to punish me any more than I'm currently potentially, based on whatever country I'm in, being punished already. Worth thinking about.